Top 15 New Games of E3 2016. This year's E3 was, in all honesty, pretty mediocre, with the exception of Sony. Nearly everything that was demonstrated was already heavily rumoured, leaked early or already shown off. Stuff like Skyrim Remastered, Crash Bandicoot's Return and Watch Dogs 2 were games we all knew were definitely happening, more or less. Still, we got to see some pretty incredible games. It seems the days of sequels and endless Call of Duty and Gears of War clones are finally over. While there are still plenty of those, this new passion for colour and variety by the AAA industry is reflected in the games. So, without further ado, here's our list of the top 15 new games from E3. Prey Reboot. Prey is getting a reboot, which isn't exactly what fans have wanted, but it's better than nothing. Based on that info and the intriguing trailer, this would have been interesting enough. But news came not long after Bethesda's E3 showcase that Fallout New Vegas and Wasteland 2 writer Chris Avellone was working with Bethesda on the new game. If nothing else, that pretty much guarantees we're in for some top-notch writing. Quake Champions. The hot new thing in online shooters right now is hero-based gameplay. It's about a handful of unique and colourful characters, each with their own abilities and equipment, and their own backstories. Quake Champions, announced at E3, looks to be following in the same vein as this, with a unique cast of characters, but with a classic Quake look and feel. We'll have to wait and see how it actually plays, but there's a solid base already there if they can capitalise on it. Dead Rising 4. The fourth game in the Dead Rising franchise looks to return to the series' roots. Luckily, the days of Dead Rising literally trying to rip off Call of Duty are over. Series protagonist Frank is back to sticking chainsaws at the end of baseball bats and dressing up as a football player for no reason. That's on top of a ton of zombies on screen at once to make sure your crazy weapon combinations get plenty of use. Forza Horizon 3. Since Sony isn't doing anything with MotorStorm anymore, Microsoft figured they might as well just do that, just using their popular Forza brand. Forza Horizon 3 is the typical realistic racing stuff you've come to expect from the franchise, along with some new jungle and desert areas that are perfect for off-road racing. If you like racing and you like Forza, there's a good chance you've already pre-ordered this anyway. State of Decay 2. State of Decay was a popular indie zombie survival horror game, one of the first of its kind. It allowed players to roam an open world and just worry about surviving as opposed to be a big story. A lot of games have come and surpassed it now, and as the genre has grown and expanded over time, it'll be fun to see how State of Decay 2 grows along with it. Representing a big shift for the franchise, State of Decay 2 will specifically be a 4-player co-op game, but not online, though you can play it single player. It's being heavily pushed as a co-op game though, as you'll always have companions with you. Steep. Much like Forza, Steep comes to us in a place of another similar game. Since EA isn't doing anything with SSX anymore, Ubisoft has decided to take up the snowboard. Though Steep might not be quite such a perfect copy, as Ubisoft seems to be taking a more buttoned-up approach, as opposed to the crazy fun of the EA games. Being a Ubisoft game, Steep will be open world, so you can travel and snowboard anywhere you want. You'll also get to jump from high places and parachute down, landing on the side of a mountain and snowboarding your way down. No word yet on whether you have to climb radio towers to unlock parts of the map. Star Trek Bridge Crew. What better way to announce a new game, a VR one set in Star Trek no less, than with LeVar Burton. That guy can sell just about anything. I mean, what isn't he excited about? Anyway, Star Trek Bridge Crew is exactly what you'd expect. It's a Star Trek VR game, very appropriate, where you play the commander of a ship, telling your subordinates to engage things. Thing is, this isn't some gimmick. Bridge Crew is being designed from the ground up to be played in VR. Imagine playing Artemis Spaceship Bridge Command if you're a nerd like me, but even more immersive with the VR goggles, and you'll have a good idea what this is like. Grow Up. Grow Home was a hugely popular indie game, so of course there was going to be a sequel. If there was one complaint with Grow Home, it's that it was a big world that didn't have a lot to do in it. Ubisoft seems to have taken that on board, and from what little we've seen of Grow Up, You'll have plenty to do this time around. Observer. There are lots of horror games, and there are lots of cyberpunk games. Have you noticed there aren't many cyberpunk horror games? Well, Observer is hoping to fill that need for you. From the makers of Layers of Fear, that painting horror game, yes really, Observer sees you taking on the role of special police officer who hunts down supernatural beings. You have the ability to hack into people's minds to read their thoughts and their memories. God of War. God of War is sort of getting rebooted, though you do still play as Kratos. He's changed now, older and wiser, and has a child and presumably a wife. We saw in the demo Kratos teaching his son how to hunt when they're suddenly ambushed by monsters. This is where we see the first bit of the new Norse mythology in the game, as well as the new combat. It's not quite so frenetic and fast-paced anymore, just like the narrative is a lot slower and more intimate now, with an over-the-shoulder camera and enemies that seem to be more than just mindless zombies. Death Stranding. Finally, we get to see what Hideo Kojima has been working on since he left Konami. It certainly isn't Metal Gear, or maybe it is. It's impossible to say what exactly his latest game is for sure. It looks like this could be what Silent Hills was going to be before Konami cancelled it and fired Kojima. It stars Norman Reedus, and certainly looks like a horror game, so who knows. Resident Evil 7. The latest numbered Resident Evil game was announced during Sony's conference, and boy does it look like a breath of fresh air for the series. RE7 seems to be in first person, at least if the playable demo is anything to go by. There also doesn't seem to be any combat at all, instead with a focus on running away and avoiding enemies entirely. We'll see how reflective that PT-esque demo was of the final product pretty soon, but it's got us excited. Days Gone. It's hard to get people interested in an open-world zombie survival game these days. Days Gone, however, seems to be doing things a bit differently from the rest. It features a biker gang for starters. You'll be playing a biker who likely is pretty different from the everyday kind of guy we're used to seeing in these kinds of games. The developers also seem to be trying to get as many zombies on screen at once as they possibly can. During the Sony conference, they showed the player character fighting and running from what looked like hundreds of zombies on screen at once, before pulling the camera back to showing hundreds more. Insomniac's Spider-Man game. Another one we don't know much about, Insomniac's Spider-Man has at least one trick up its sleeve. It seems Marvel is finally adapting its movie approach, that is, making good films and not just cash grabs, to video games. In an interview after the show, Marvel's Vice President of Games, Jay Ong, stated Insomniac's Spider-Man game will be the first in a long line of high-quality Marvel superhero games. When you combine the fact that Insomniac is working on the game, you know this one is going to be good. The trailer has shown that web slinging will be an important part of the game, and mobility seems like a top priority for the team, as it should be. Oxygen Not Included. Oxygen Not Included is a colony simulation game set in space. Imagine Fallout Shelter crossed with Theme Hospital set in space, and that's essentially Oxygen Not Included. This one aims to be a realistic and in-depth simulator where you have to constantly manage your food, water and oxygen, as well as expand the base and bring on new recruits. It sounds like it'll be hectic once you get into it, and